at the Amherst kitchen table of Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe. I was reading the New York Times Sunday edition, as I do every weekend, and I was grabbed by a great headline. The digital version headline is not as good, but I'll read that verbatim. NASA did not say it found life on Mars, but it's very excited about this rock. I believe the print version headline said something more akin to, and I like this better, life on Mars, question mark? Not exactly, but signs of life on Mars. So what is happening with this rock that our Perseverance rover, which has connections to Western Massachusetts, right, is doing on Mars right now?
That's right. So this is potentially a big news, but we have to be very careful. And Perseverance rover that is on Mars that landed over there, I think in 2021, and it is at one of the most interesting places on Mars that you can land on. I mean, there are other places also if humans are there, but this is a Jezero crater. So where we know that a few billion years ago, this place was filled up with water, and so there was standing water for a while, and this Perseverance rover has been roving over there, and right now it is at a place which is sort of like a river delta, and it has so it has been looking at rocks and other things. But just now, on July 21st or something like that, they found a rock which astronomers think that that's the most interesting rock it has found so far. And they've been very careful. One of the reasons is that this has not been peer reviewed, and so but they wanted to make the announcement. And the reason for that was the team that has been analyzing this was presenting at a conference, and so that news would have come out anyway. And so NASA did this press release, and I actually like it that they have been very careful in saying what they have found. And so signs of life, I think, is an accurate statement. And there is a caveat to that because, or the reason why there is a caveat is because in 1996, astronomers found there was this rock. We have talked about it before, I think. It was called ALH 84001. And NASA had a press conference. This was a rock from Mars, so it was a Martian meteoroid. And the press conference in 96 basically made a claim that it had signatures of past life or signs of fossils of life on Mars. Now, that was a big statement, and
because it would have been the first time there was confirmed life anywhere else in the universe besides this planet.
That's right. And at the press conference, they were being careful. This was in 1996, in which they said, well, of course, there are going to be tests. Of course, there are going to be other people that are going to be challenging it, so on and so forth. But the headline was that astronomers may have found fossilized life forms from Mars. And at that time, President Bill Clinton did a press conference saying that, which ended up showing up in the movie Contact, side note. But this was at the time huge, and I was in graduate school. I remember we were all like, okay, we all gathered together in the conference room to watch the news, because it was considered as, well, while we were watching it, listening to that, this is a moment we may remember our entire lives. Well, it turned out that those signatures that was in that Martian meteoroid may have been chemical and not biological, or geological, not biological. And so now most astronomers, almost all, not all of them, but most believe that that was not a sign of fossilized life.
But interesting enough that there are still people that do.
That is correct, but not all, right? And again, so this goes back to this question that this claim of even past evidence of past life on another planet, past fossilized life on Mars, it's such a huge claim that you have to be absolutely sure to make it. And again, from Carl Sagan, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so this press conference, or this signs of life, I think, is coming from that perspective, learning lessons from the 1990s announcement of the Martian meteoroid ALH 84001. And so this time they are saying, okay, this is very interesting, but we're not saying the L word. We're not saying that it's life, but it looks like it may have signs of potential fossilized life form.
Now, the problem is the rock is still on Mars. They want to get this rock back so that they can look at it. That's going to be a huge cost. And I think they're also kind of putting the word out there like, hey, if anybody's got good ideas how we can get this rock back cheaper, let's do that.
Right. So the problem with that is, so the timings in some sense is fortuitous, or maybe if you are of the conspiratorial mind, like, too coincidence, like, in that sense that just recently NASA announced that there was a plan, Mars sample return, and that was for 2030, that there's going to be a mission that's going to go. This particular rover, Perseverance rover, is collecting rock samples from this area and leaving them over there to be picked up from this Mars sample return, including from this particular rock. And of course, it has instruments over there. But what you can do from instruments here on Earth is incomparable, because you can actually use some of the biggest sort of instruments here. You can really analyze it much more carefully. So it is a big deal to bring samples back from Mars, which no one has so far done. But the mission right now is slated to cost about $11 billion. And the cost was still spiraling up. So just early this year or late last year, I think earlier this year, NASA has put it on sort of on a cold burner, on a back burner, and they said, well, maybe it is being canceled. Maybe somebody else, for private companies, if they want to take some cheaper approach. So they've made a call, that, hey, if somebody can come up with better method, but we would like to bring those samples back. NASA itself is also looking for alternatives to what they have been working on, because what they have been working on has become too expensive. And you can imagine, so right now Perseverance rover is taking these samples, and we don't know how they are going to come back if there is another spacecraft that goes and collects them. It has to get to different places, or is the Perseverance rover going to collect them back and put it in one place, and then the spacecraft has to, remember, even just to land on Mars is hard, and there you would have to take off from there, collect those samples, take off from there, and then come back to Mars, something that no one or no country or no company has ever done before. Mm-hmm. So that's where the challenge lies, but it would be really cool to analyze it. And as a caveat, we always mention that China does have a plan of Mars sample return, I think in the early 2030s. So maybe that may be a motivation for that. Nevertheless, this particular rock looks like a really fascinating sample.
What are the signs of life in this rock that everybody's excited about?
So there are
it's not like a Martian face. It's not like a little body. We're talking microbial life here. We're talking like the most basic life. And the fact that this was a river delta at one point with active water, everywhere there's water on this planet, there is life. So this is why this is a great place to look to see if there ever was life.
Right. And this is, again, a comparison, a contrast to people who make claims about UFOs.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I saw something. It must be flying saucer. Or I cannot explain this something. This is a great example of how careful you should be if you are doing good science. And so in this particular case, first of all, in this rock, they found organic compounds. Organic compounds are carbon-based compounds that have carbon atoms in it. They are the building blocks of life, so that is great. But organic compounds can also be from non-biological processes, so that by in itself doesn't make it interesting. However, there has been very few signatures of organic compounds on Mars. So this is a confirmed detection that there are organic compounds there, and that's a big deal. Second thing they found in this particular rock, there are these sort of lines of calcium sulfate. And this is a mineral deposit which is usually deposited by flowing water. So we know, so again, even though we talked about a river delta, we talked about other things, you still want to be sure that that water, liquid water was there, because liquid water is key, as we understand it, to life. So this particular rock, it looks like, was definitely underwater, or there was flowing water around it. So that was the second piece that was important. But the third one is that it also had iron in it. So it's hematite, which is iron, which gives Mars the color red, for example. And so that was also there. But they found these, what they're calling leopard spots. And these are small, sort of like, small off-white splotches. And around that, there are black rings. And the question is that, well, they had not been found before. And that is really piquing interest of scientists, because these black rings contains iron phosphate. Now, that is okay, but on Earth, these type of leopard spots are created. This is a chemical reaction that creates these leopard spots that can provide energy to microbes. And so here on Earth, and there are examples in the press release or in the article, they talked about sort of like, that these are similar to Red Canyon, for example, outside of Las Vegas. You have similar red rocks in there, and you have similar features. And they, on Earth, when you see those are usually the signatures that microbes have been there. They actually use this iron for energy source. And so if you are looking for comparisons, on Earth, they usually mean that there are microbes around there, or microbes were there. And so on Mars, you see these splotches, you see these leopard spots, what they are calling, of iron phosphate. But is it life? Well, we don't know, right? Because that is where we are not seeing actual fossils or microbial fossils over there, whatever that would mean. But we are seeing indirect signatures of potential life, that or microbial life that existed on Mars perhaps a billion or a few billion years ago, when there was water there.
Signs of life.
And that is where, in some sense, it becomes important if we could bring samples back, because this would be a pristine sample, unlike Martian rocks that can fall on Earth. And there are, I think, a couple of dozen of these Martian meteoroids here. Those have been in space for a long time. They go through our atmosphere, and then, unlike ALH 84001, which was really interesting because that particular rock was lodged a few billion years ago when Mars had liquid water on it. Most rocks from Mars do not. So this particular rock, for example, that Perseverance rover has found, this is an interesting one if we can bring it back. Now, this may also be a starting point, because you may find more rocks like that in some sense, because you are in this interesting area, and they may start finding more things and to analyze that. But one of the thing that I should mention, where there is a little bit of hesitation that comes in, because they also found olivine, sort of like the millimeter size crystals of olivine, which is usually, it's a mineral that is formed in magma. And so that means actually there was it was brought in from some place, or maybe it was too hot. So it's unclear. They have all of these signs of potential life, but we don't know how the rock itself was formed. And if we don't know that, we cannot be sure that there was life there. So it is, I would put it, this is really exciting. I think this is, if you read between the lines of the press release has been very carefully written, and I think that is great. Because if you are going to claim that there was ever life on Mars, and again, just as a context, so far, the only place in the universe where we are 100% sure there is life is the Earth. And so to make a claim that there is life elsewhere, or there was life elsewhere, that actually is a huge, huge thing, because at least for Mars, there will still be a question whether that life arose independently of the Earth, or potentially it arose on one of the planets, and because we exchange rocks, perhaps it went from one planet to another. But that would be a huge deal. And if we find signs of life, what kind of life there is on Mars? Is it based on a similar kind of biology that is on Earth? Or it's different? That would be very exciting. But those claims are so huge that you have to be careful. And so, if one lesson you take from this, one is, well, I mean, it's really exciting. It's really cool. Keep on following this. The second thing is, I said one lesson, but here's the second lesson. When you hear about UFOs, when you hear about other claims, just look at this story of the way scientists who would love to believe that there is life, who want to believe there is life, how careful they tend to be, because we don't want to fool ourselves. It doesn't do anybody any good if we just want to believe in it without sufficient evidence.